I found this. I might be able to use that for something.
Here we are at the ktm620. Now, is it called a Duke?
There was a Duke version of it.
Okay.
And that was more like the full-blown street version, I believe.
Gotcha. So what we got here is we went ahead or Mike went ahead and got a crank.
From Germany.
From Germany, is Sprechen Sie Deutsch, with a really good fitting rod. But this bike is a kickstart only bike, no electric starter. So this side of the crankshaft, it's a different, this is bigger and longer. So
this crank is actually, and it wasn't specified that it was a electric start bike, and I subsequently found out that there are different, the cranks are different, and the case is actually different. The case has got different deals. This side of the case, where the stator goes, has an additional piece, so it needs to be wider.
And it's probably a bigger stator too.
There's a different stator.
Different stator,
yeah. There's a whole bunch of different things going on there.
Okay.
It's stuff that's not really easily found in KTM's definition or their documentation.
So, okay, let's take a look at the piston.
So this is the piston that came with
the cylinder.
The new cylinder, or the used cylinder. The piston and the cylinder came together, and it was recommended to get new rings, stock rings. This is basically the stock piston and stock rings. However, because this bike is so old, in relative terms, in bike terms, they've stopped manufacturing, or you can't very well easily find new rings. Even though this piston is perfectly fine and can be used, the ring gap is too big in here. I can't find the rings for it. I ordered rings for it, and they came and they don't fit. So I returned them, and I bought a new piston.
Nothing sexier than a new piston. I'll tell you that right now.
Now this piston, this stock one, is a cast piston. They did make a forged version. However, this was the cast version. But this thing is
I hear angels singing. You hear that?
Is a work of freaking art. This is a forged piston that came from Weisco.
Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful.
They say on here, I believe it's 12-to-1 compression.
Okay.
Is all the specs. But it fits just the same as that's the stock diameter. So this can be honed. And
man, the walls look really good. I don't see any.
There's no
drama.
None.
I don't know if you all can see that there in TV land. There's like one little mark, but you can tell that that's all it is. It's just a mark. Can't feel it. Looks good. Yeah, cylinder looks good. Freshy piston.
But these rings are totally within spec.
Yeah.
As far as ring gap. And
now the one thing I'm wondering, I'm not big into the motorcycle stuff, but I wonder, you see it's 12-to-1.
Yes.
Well, 12-to-1 with aluminum head on a car is getting close to not working on pump gas.
Yes.
And with this, I guess it depends on the overlap on the valves.
Yeah, I don't think it's really that aggressive.
Okay.
We'll find out.
Yep, we will find out.
The big question that I have, and I've actually watched some videos about this, is how to actually start this thing.
The first time?
No, physically kicking it.
Oh.
With that high of compression.
Well, don't you have the decompression valve?
Yes, but you still have to
overcome.
That's only to get it in the right position, and then you've got to kick it beyond that.
So I wonder if you take it up partially up on the compression stroke, and then
maybe
we'll find out.
Maybe. Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna. There we go.
Okay, so I decided, because this is a WP shock. That was a sticker I got because it did not have a sticker.
Okay.
And I had not rebuilt one, and it has some funky quirks to it. I decided to take it in and have it rebuilt. And I found a local shop that, yes, we can rebuild it. We can change the oil and replace the bumper, because the bumper was gone. There was no bumper, and we can do that. And we can. He asked about the seal, and I said, if it's bad, go for it. If you can find one. He did replace, this thing had a floating piston in it. The way they come is a floating piston. He actually changed this out and put in a bladder kit, which is more in tune to the Japanese shocks.
Oh, okay.
And it's actually better for enduro stuff for controlling the shock instead of the floating piston. Mm-hmm. It's easier actually to rebuild it, to bleed it out and so forth. And also easier to...
I saw the fitting on there. That's what I was looking at. I wanted to get a shot of the fitting.
All the easier to charge it with nitrogen.
And to adjust the charge if you wanted to tinker with the ride quality. So
2.5 weeks went by, and he calls me and says, the shock's done. I'm like, great, let's go down there. So I went down there and spent a bunch of money and picked it up. It looked great. And I came home and put it on the bike and thought, we're done. We got our shock rebuilt. We're all good, right? Not so much. After a little while, like a couple days, my bike was just sitting in there. Obviously, it doesn't have an engine in it yet, and I'm just working on it. But I noticed a little bit of oil underneath this, where this thing was. Figured it was just residual from the rebuild and didn't really worry about it. Week and a half, 2 weeks go by, and I'm working on the other Suzuki because I had changed the shock in that bike because I rebuilt that one. Uh-huh. And I moved the KTM outside to get room. Brought it back, and when I brought it back in, pushed down on it, and oil started just draining out of this thing. You can see there's residual oil in here. Yeah. This thing was leaking like a sieve. I was like, what the heck? Called up the guy. He says, I thought the seal would work. It was the only one I could find. It didn't exactly match the bike. I thought it would work. If you can find one, I'll redo it for nothing. So I'm like, well, started sourcing shocks and so forth. Came up with this one. Basically the same freaking thing. It's just not rebuilt. And it came from a local recycler. And this has got the floating piston in it. In the meantime, I have gone online and found a company in Australia who I believe has the correct seals and bushings and so forth for these shocks. And we will find out in the next week or so whether or not that's going to actually pan out. If I can get these, if they are the right parts and I could get them, probably going to have this one rebuilt with those parts, and that won't cost anything other than the parts that I got to get. And I'll use this one in the interim on the bike. And once that one gets done, then I'll have this one done, because why not?
Yeah.
Then I'll have a spare and we'll be all good. Essentially, it's the same shock. It just... So that's where we're at with that.
Perfect.